Hey, welcome everyone back to the Dusty Wheel. I'm your host, the Innkeeper, and this is our live call-in talk show all about the Wheel of Time. So tonight happens to be one of our favorite episodes. We started doing live adaptations of the book way back when the channel started. And now we happen to be in the Great Hunt and having a hard time getting through it. There's just too much material to try to adapt, and we haven't been making any great cuts, I don't think. But tonight, I'm interested in what we're going to do with the White Tower. We finally arrived at the White Tower, and what's really awesome is we have some special guests that might have a couple opinions about the White Tower itself. So I can't wait to get going here. I'm really anxious to see what everyone's going to say as far as what we need to do as far to adapt the White Tower into the show, right? If we were Rafe and his team, how would we put this into television? And that's becoming very relevant as we get to the end of the principal photography, and we don't really know how far or if they're going to go into the Great Hunt. And if they do, then we'll find out just what decisions they make. But we get to make those decisions first, which is going to be fun. So without any further ado, let me bring in all of my panelists tonight. Welcome to the five of you. Hey, welcome everyone. And to our special guest, the White Tower podcast, Jess and Jenn. It's so awesome to have you here. And you three too, Todd, Mary, and Natalia.
Well,
I'm glad you're
thanks.
here. I'm glad you're here. It's awesome to have you. But our special guest tonight, thank you very much for being with us. For those of you that have never heard, I mean, it's not possible, right? But if you've never heard of Jess and Jenn, please go. I think in the description of the video, we've put their links. Go check them out. They're awesome. Their podcast is great. And they were on with us back in, I want to say it was November. I think it was November. We did a fun interview. Go back and listen to that one. That one's great. But tonight, we have you back with us doing something a little bit different. So let's just jump into this. We obviously are going to at first just cover the chapters that deal with the White Tower, because what I was surprised about was there was so much Rand and company and not very much White Tower. So I wanted to kind of break this down and find out what we should actually do when adapting this. So before we dive into the first chapter, which I think is chapter 18 is when they arrive. So, and Jess, I wanted to come to you first with this question, which is, what do Rafe and his team have to get right about the the Wheel of Time when it comes to the White Tower? What do they, from a thematic perspective, what is kind of some of the key kind of attributes that they have to kind of portray on TV?
I think that, especially when we see the White Tower for the very first time, I think that that sense of other that's described, this gigantic White Tower in the middle of the city, and the square around it is basically empty because everybody kind of skirts around it because they have this sort of awestruck feeling about it that, like, you don't get too close, and even if you have to go there, you almost kind of don't want to because you're so intimidated. Like, that whole sense of, like, the lofty ideals of Aes Sedai, and really nailing that kind of almost icy kind of feel, I think is probably going to be one of the most important things of really establishing the tone for the White Tower throughout the rest of the series.
Yeah, I like the word you used. You used awe, right? I think they absolutely have to get awe and lofty, right? That those two
Mm-hmm.
things have to come across with, and it struck me as we get to this, chapter 18, just what when it comes to that aspect of it, how they'll do this in a way that's just believable to us. Jenn, is there something else that kind of comes to mind for you as far as awe, loftiness? What else do they have to get right?
Reading these books, I mean, everyone has their own mind, their own picture in their mind of what they think of when it comes to the White Tower. And I'm like a Never-Ending Story fan. So I think of like the ivory tower from the Never-Ending Story. Anyway, that's just what I think. Just something on the scale of Dragon Mount, but not as tall. What do you see when you see Dragon Mount kind of in the background, right? So it's kind of like the counterpoint to the big mound with the dragon is. So I just think something equally awe-inspiring. If it's not as tall, then maybe it's more lofty. I don't know. Maybe just little spires next to it, very, very teeny, like minarets and that sort of thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Certainly from this should be kind of one of the most magnificent places that's ever seen, probably in my opinion, in the show, right? Mm-hmm. This should be, this is from, the Ogier built the city, when it comes to what they see, it should just be kind of White Bridge times 100, right? That's kind of at least how I think about it. That should be kind of the awe. And I guess I'm hoping that the way they present this, it doesn't feel, I don't know, too fantastical. In other words, I don't want it to seem too unreal. There has to be something almost like real about the buildings in the way that we would consider them, real. But I don't know, I'm not explaining that right. But in the end, I want this to feel like an experience that I could walk through, and not so much just kind of like the CGI. From afar, you see this large thing, and then when you get up close, it just doesn't have that sense of size. Is there anyone else?
I know.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I know exactly what you mean with that. And I think that, like, kind of the image that sprung to mind is, like, take Minas Tirith from the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yeah.
And then, like, condense it and figure out what Ogier built means and sort of make that kind of conversion. But, like, this sort of shining white, I mean, Minas Tirith is a shining white city, and this is just a tower, but it's a shining white tower in the middle of this desolate plain, right? And it just really needs to stand out. And, Jordan makes a big deal out of Ogier architecture, even at the very beginning of the books. And I really want to see them come up with something unique and well-defined for Ogier architecture. So then people who are watching, you get Ogier architecture as a concept, and then when other things show up that are Ogier built, you can make that connection. You can say, oh, this is an Ogier built thing too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you're saying, that it has to be unique, right? Like something that we just haven't seen on screen before. And that's probably one of the bigger challenges for them, which is that this city doesn't just feel like Minas Tirith, right? Like, it doesn't just feel like they just grabbed it from another fantasy fiction epic and slapped it on the screen. At least that's kind of how I perceive the challenge that they have, which is just that initial view. Yeah, I'm hoping that they can come up with something that is other, that we do call Ogier built, and it doesn't just feel like it's, from Harry Potter or something like that. It actually has a unique characteristic to it.
They could do something like they did in when they did Wakanda in Black Panther. The architecture was quite stunning and quite stylistic, and it was in the background, and it helped set the mood, but it didn't overpower the plot or the character development that was going on. But it was very distinctive and very different than what we're used to seeing when we think of grand architecture. But it didn't look, it was still grand architecture. It was just different. And I think that, if they somehow strike that balance, it will work.
Yeah.
Well, and I like what you're saying. I'm sorry, I'm totally monopolizing this.
No,
I like what you're saying about grand architecture. So you take grand architecture and then you kick it up a couple of notches, because the other piece of the puzzle with these Ogier built cities and bridges is that it almost seems like it defies the laws of physics, right? You have these gigantic arching bridges that do not have the support structure that we see on gigantic bridges in our world. So
as long as it doesn't look like the Jetsons, it'll be fine.
Yeah, we don't know. The Jetsons are cool, but
I like that. Yeah. I like that idea. It does have to look, you're right, it can't look just like it's, a city here, but at the same time, it has to somewhere not get to Jetsons. I like that. I like that range that we've established here.
Well, I mean, imagine the Burj Al Khalifa in marble.
Yeah.
Right? So that kind of, I'm not saying it's the White Tower. I'm just saying you're looking for, imagine sort of
This
that kind of
look.
Yeah, super distinctive, very unique, and awe-inspiring in materials we're not used to seeing.
Yeah, and I don't want to belabor this point too much, but I will say this: The Witcher did not create any awe in the settings when I watched something like that. And I'm really hoping that they don't do a lot of those kind of cut scenes where you just get this image of like, here's Tarvalin, and then it's like, and now we happen to be in a tower that looks like it has a dome in it. I'm really hoping that they put some time into feeling like we are in that city.
I want to dispute that.
You want to dispute my characterization of how they demonstrated the settings in The Witcher?
I feel like the intimate settings, the up camera close stuff was, like clearly on a set or in Prague, which no shame. But their map paintings were really, really well done. Okay.
Despite their map paintings, it didn't look, the size and scope and awe just wasn't there, at least for me when I saw it.
I don't know, like the sweeping shots of both. Here I go high pitched real early, guys. The sweeping shots of both big cities. The Tower of Sodden Hill, and I know I'm not convincing you, Matt. It's fine. Move on.
Okay. Chapter 18. Here, let's jump into it. This is the fun stuff. Keep, cut, or kill is kind of the way we play this game, which is at the end of a chapter, we really decide here, beyond just kind of the theme of some of these things, do we just really need to get rid of some of these characters, plots, etc.? So here we have Egwene and we have Nynaeve on the ship on the way to Tarvalin.
Cut.
And cut. You're already jumping into cut. Wow.
That was a joke.
No, you can make that case. I want to hear it. Yeah.
We're not even Egwene. No story. I'm playing. It was a joke.
No, so Jen, let me go to that. Do you think that this is this piece about them? No? Okay.
No. There was a complete. Please continue. I'm sorry.
I'll go.
She was channeling Tyler.
I didn't mean it, but please.
No. That's fine. So we have this whole scene where Egwene is talking to Nynaeve about dreams. The Amyrlin comes in to train them, and then we have this battle of wills between the Amyrlin and Nynaeve. And
Gotta keep it.
Yeah, I mean, there's something really nice about this, but I want to bring up this point, and maybe this will be a point of contention throughout this entire discussion, which is the Amyrlin begins almost immediately by threatening Nynaeve. And she comes in very kind of intimidating, and then she picks her up, turns her over, threatens to paddle her, and at some level, how are we going to convince new viewers that that haven't read the books, or maybe we don't have to convince them? What is it that we're going to get across to the viewer about the Aes Sedai? What should they understand about the Aes Sedai, as demonstrated by the Amyrlin, I guess, in this scene? And Jess, to you, do you what is coming across, at least to you when you read this, and what should come across to the viewers in the TV series if they adapt this scene?
Well, I actually want to let Jen go because I've done a lot of talking, and I think she has thoughts. So
go for it. Let's hear it, Jen. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to be quiet. No, I don't think this scene is really meant to express a lot about the Aes Sedai in general. I think it's more character building, or actually creating tension, or showing that Nynaeve isn't going to just bend automatically just because she's, convinced herself, okay, this is the route that I have to take. Doesn't mean I have to like it, and it doesn't mean I have to behave like an Aes Sedai. And it's the battle of wills, I think, really, between Swan and her. And also is character building for Swan too. It shows you that, yeah, I'm the Amyrlin, but that doesn't mean I won't pick you up and show you who's boss. So it shows that she isn't she's willing to fight, and essentially, and herself, she doesn't need to stand behind someone to do the work for her. And I think it's just character building later, because obviously you get more of Swan's sense of rolling up her sleeves, so to speak, and taking care of work herself. And also, in a way, they're very similar, aren't they? So I think it's their stubbornness just butting heads, and I think that's important to show right off the bat.
It also
met in real life, that's how they would act, right?
Right.
That's how Jen and I were like at the very beginning.
So yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. Okay.
I'm gonna jump in here and just also make a point that this shows just how strategic and clever Swan is as well. She did her homework in advance. She showed up with the plan. She executed the plan, and then she told Nynaeve what the plan was. Like, her goal from minute one was to put Nynaeve's back up and piss her off. for a purpose. So every word she spoke between then and Nynaeve actually reaching the source was for a point. It wasn't just to piss Nynaeve off.
But it also is to show Nynaeve that not only you might be stronger, but I know more than you do.
And I think, too, along those same lines, Nynaeve has been hearing that, she's going to be the strongest Aes Sedai that anybody has seen in at least 1,000 years. And Siuan doesn't know her yet. She doesn't know if Nynaeve is going to come in thinking that she deserves any kind of special treatment, or if she's got a big head about these capabilities that she supposedly has. And so she comes in there and she fucking crunches her right off the bat, like, you're a peon and you're going to get treated like all the other peons. And also, like Natalia said, sort of doing her homework and picking at her until she got pissed off enough to channel so that Siuan could see for herself, is she actually as powerful as Maureen has been telling me? So, smart lady, Siuan.
Yeah, I think that does come across here, right? Showing Nynaeve's strength is important, but also showing that Siuan is, craftier and smarter. That needs to come across. When she pulls, she forces her. We don't see it on screen. We hear it afterwards, but she forces her mouth open and forces this dark glob of something in her mouth. The question I have is, how much do we want to see that kind of intense training? How important is that for the viewers as far as adapting this piece of the books? Do we need to see this intense training that Nynaeve is going through, and how the lengths at which the Aes Sedai, in this case Siuan, will go to try to, in essence, just get her to channel? I mean, that's what's happening here, right? Is it's challenging her to try to break this block. Is that something, Mary, that you think people that are viewing the show for the first time and never read the books are going to understand? Like, as someone who's read it for a long time, it doesn't, I kind of gloss over it, but is that something that's going to come across? Like, why is this necessary?
It depends. A lot of that we learn through extrapolation and exposition in the books, which you don't have in the television setting. But you can say at some point in time that Nynaeve cannot channel unless she is, stark raving angry. And that can be, her temper is probably going to be front and center in a lot of her interactions up to this point. And, you don't have to go into every nitty gritty detail of this entire encounter. I mean, in fact, even, the sheep's tongue route happened off screen, even in the book. So you don't have to put it on screen in the show. You can have them pushing each other around with air. That's an easy, cheap effect to do. It gets the point across. It shows that they're both strong. It shows that they're both capable. It shows that Egwene can stand there and watch this whole thing and it just sets up all three characters and what they need to do later in the series. And this whole scene probably will play out in 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops. It shows how dangerous the world of the Aes Sedai is. At this point in time, we've seen Moiraine, we've seen Elida, we've seen Verin, hopefully. We've seen Lianjin. Now we're seeing, and so we're now seeing the differences of the different types of Aes Sedai and how all of them are cool and composed, and then you have Siuan, who comes in and basically picks her up and plays with her, and during the entire encounter, she is very calm. She is very down to earth. So it shows she may be the queen, but she's not afraid to get her hands dirty, and I think that's an integral part of her character.
Yeah. And I wanted to make another point about that too, that this is a great opportunity to highlight how quickly Nynaeve learns. Nynaeve can see a weave once and know exactly how to do it and do it again. And so that's what she did, is she saw what Siuan did when she picked her up and messed around with her with these weaves of air. She saw it and she duplicated it like that. Right. And that's something that's actually apparently not all that common. It takes practice, but Nynaeve can do it without a problem right away.
Right. And also she learns to how to control herself in that situation, and which is also one of the lessons that Siuan was trying to teach, is you need to be able to control yourself as an Aes Sedai. And that can be portrayed very easily with some good acting.
Yeah, I like all these comments. I think you've kind of pulled out all the different threads that need to happen here, which is which makes this scene very important, I think. As you've seen, we just talked about it, for a good 5 or 10 minutes. This one piece of the book that actually does teach us a lot about the relationship between the Aes Sedai, and their novices, right? Their relationship between teaching someone to channel and why it's so important. And I think the viewers, hopefully by this point, will gain this understanding that this isn't, something, it's just kind of fanciful magic, that shows up in other books. Like, they take this extremely seriously, right? And I'm hoping that comes across because that's what, transcends the next couple chapters that we go into, which is, this is serious business, right? This is not just like, oh, teach somebody to throw a fireball, right? They care a lot about this process and the winnowing process down to the actual people who become Aes Sedai. How do you create someone like Moiraine and someone like Siuan? How does someone become like them? And this, I think, is a good beginning of an inkling of that process. So yeah, I love this scene a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and as we know, it's the White Tower as an entity has a lot of flaws. We know this, but they do take the whole idea of with great power comes great responsibility. They take that very seriously. And also, if you think about it, I don't think really, and I haven't read a ton of other fantasy, but in general, you don't have the stakes aren't death if you fuck it up. Whereas with the power, if you don't know what you're doing, you could hurt yourself. You could kill yourself. You could still yourself. The stakes are really, really high. And so you have to hold these women to a high standard. You have to get up in their face and really push them,
Yep.
because you have to be able to handle the pressure of having this enormous amount of power and still be able to wield it in a calm enough manner that you're not going to hurt yourself in the process. Those are high stakes.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as this next piece of this scene, they actually arrive at Tar Valon, and we see them kind of go off the ship by themselves, and they have the whole kind of see the city moment, which were talked about at the beginning, which is we hope that Rafe and his team get right. This kind of awe-inspiring, they see that, every building seemed like a palace was one of the quotes, and just they get that scene, but then they meet Sheriam, or however you pronounce her name. And is this a key piece, Jen? Do you think can we cut this piece? Would you cut this where they meet her and they have this oh, I'm the mistress of the novices and I'm here to wait for you, and she kind of does some exposition. Is this an important part in your mind that we adapt into the TV series, or can we just dump it?
Todd. Sorry, I'm just watching his reaction.
Todd, you're next.
I was like, I think Todd wants to speak. Why don't you please let him go? I'll rescind my turn and let him jump ahead of me. I think he has some feelings, like Jess said.
I think Todd and Talia both have strong opinions about it.
Go ahead, Todd.
Okay, Todd, you can go first. You jumped on that one.
Okay. The only thing that this scene does is introduce Sheriam, and I think the rest of it's a lot of crap that we can get rid of, and we can meet her later. So I say cut it. It can see ya.
You're just an easy, quick cut it. Okay, so that's Jen. Are you on that same wavelength? Do you think anything's happening here? I mean, we just passed this 10-minute scene that we just discussed with the important things learned. This section, do we need to keep it?
No, we don't need to keep it. We can cut it.
Is anyone speaking in favor of this?
She sounds so sad though.
You don't have to agree with me. Nobody else does.
No, I know that. Yeah, it's just getting to the cutting parts. It's just I love Sheriam, but just get rid of it.
Well, I don't think this is necessarily a matter of cutting. This is a matter of relocating. I mean, Sheriam has to be introduced at some point.
Sure.
We can do that at another time.
Okay.
Right.
It doesn't have to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like the idea that this is really this impactful.
You see that? You see them, honestly, you see them on the boat looking at Tar Valon being like, whoa. And then the next introduction is Nynaeve Test.
See, no, so this is the one place I want to disagree. I want to see them walk up to the tower, whether or not, however it is. In other words, I want to be there and feel just as awe-inspired as them when they get to the city. So I still think we have to get them off the boat. But I'll agree with you that once we get them off the boat and we have that little bit of a moment that we can kind of fast forward to the show. It just feels a little bit rushed to jump to that aspect of what's going on. And maybe that's a good question. So Mary, we have this moment when they come off the boat, and then the chapters actually switch to Moraine and Lan up doing their research, and
which can happen at any time.
Yeah, we don't need that here. So the next chapter we come back to is chapter 23 with Nynaeve's accepted test. Is that how you would anticipate or want them to adapt is that our next interaction with the White Tower in your mind? Or do you want to see Rafe and his team actually expand our interaction with the White Tower itself? Like see some of the administration, see some of the things going on before we just jump into this kind of pivotal moment for Nynaeve?
You might see that in passing on the way to the White Tower or in the White Tower. I could also see them, Nynaeve and Egwene walking up and then like Sheriam popping up behind them and surprising them, as opposed to down at the harbor. That could work too. I think that it's kind of a point of pride that Nynaeve was never never a novice and went straight to an accepted. So going straight to that scene makes sense, and there's really no need to change that. I do want to see how the White Tower works. I mean, Tar-Valon's supposed to be not only the center of power for Aes Sedai, it's also a commercial center and a political center. It's in their own minds, it's the center of the world. So this is huge cosmopolitan city with this tower, this gorgeous tower in the middle, which is basically empty because there aren't a lot of people in it.
Yeah.
Is that an important point? Nah, probably, maybe not. Depends on the field they're going for. But no, they going straight to the accepted scene makes sense. And, they can get into the nuts and bolts of training. I'm not interested in a huge White Tower training montage because there really isn't much one in the story itself. So putting it up on screen, you put yourself in danger of getting parallels drawn to Harry Potter if you do that.
It's also a lot of light this candle, blow it out. Like, I mean, Nynaeve is like she hit the nail on the head in terms of like learning to address the source, learning to access the source. The early stagers are boring. Better to sort of jump in and stay behind Nynaeve as one of our key characters and one of the people that we're emotionally supporting and emotionally behind by seeing her put through such a traumatic and terrible experience makes us hate the Aes Sedai and Moraine a little bit that they're doing this to somebody that we love and care about.
Okay, so there, and Jesse, I want to come to you here in just a second. There is a little bit of tension there that could come from that same scene that we just had with Nynaeve and Siuan, which is kind of carrying this idea of how much serious business this is, So I do like that idea of keeping that tension. That would be a smart way in the television series, I can imagine. So yeah, I like that a lot. Jess, what do you think about this idea of going straight to the Nynaeve's accepted test?
Well, I've got a couple of thoughts on this. First of all, you never have a second chance to make a first impression. And we're seeing Tar-Valon for the first time through the eyes of Egwene and Nynaeve, who are also seeing it for the first time. And so I think that moment is going to be really, really, really critical. All the things that we talked about at the beginning with, the way the architecture looks and how the tower itself is presented as, this awesome kind of thing, that is going to be important. And I think that we don't want to skim over that too quickly. Now, the other thing that I want to point out with going straight from that to Nynaeve's accepted test is that the average viewer who hasn't read the book isn't going to really understand what it means to be a novice versus be accepted. We need some kind of something that lays it out so that the viewer understands what a novice does and what it means for somebody to be elevated to accepted right off the bat. She walks in the door already taking the test, and that's huge. That doesn't happen. And I think it's important for viewers to understand that, you know what I mean? And so I don't think that maybe the test on its own is going to be enough to drive that home. We really need to know the monotony of being a novice. And we don't have to spend 15 minutes on it, but, maybe a class of novices doing something super, super boring, the rosebud opening and everything. But, we need to, I think it's important to drive home the fact that there's a big difference between being a novice and being accepted. and that needs to be illustrated. So I don't agree that we should walk into the tower and then immediately cut to Nynaeve's test. I think that we need to lay a little bit of groundwork inside the tower first to get an idea of what the mechanics are and how things work there. This would be a great opportunity to introduce Sheriam. She would be able to, through dialogue, introduce a lot of those concepts.
It could be happening in the background as well as they're walking through.
Exactly. So, this is one of those show, don't tell kind of things.
Yeah.
That,
I love that. How do we, so along with that line, but Mary, you brought up a mission point, and maybe I'll ask Jenn this question. How do we avoid if we do this, how do we avoid kind of that Harry Potter kind of everyone's going to class moment and maybe avoid this feeling like we've seen this movie before? What is it? What's different about this, and how is it, or how can we make this different if we adapt it for TV?
I think that's going to mainly be done with, oddly enough, lighting and scene work. If you think about all the Harry Potter movies, really quickly, they all did this.
Potty, just so you know.
Harry Potter.
And I love you.
It's hard for me to say it. Harry Potter movies. Okay, so it's all dark, no matter what because they had different directors for all the different movies, right? Each director decided to put it in a very dark, like, hunched over, big, thick textbooks, very cold, dark, damp looking places. I think you can automatically, subconsciously deviate between that if you just put up big, airy, like looming, like windows, letting in lots of light. Obviously, that stark contrast that there's no boys around, right? Just show everything, like, kind of as you go through, or maybe doing that sweeping shot you guys were talking about, like show don't tell, just showing all the women, right? And it being nothing but light white spaces, and maybe that is going to do it subconsciously in the viewer's mind of cold, light, white, almost, how every movie does that shot in heaven where everything's just white. You know what I mean? Not that bad, but kind of on that same stark plane, something like that. That's what
I like that.
Also,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say also the appearance of the women. If we're looking at a huge group of novices and they're all in white, which is going to be something completely different. You can tell that except that are different because they've got the colored bands on their dresses. And, you can also do different things because the novices do learn in groups, they learn in classes, but you can do something different where it's not a typical classroom setting. They're not sitting at desks or tables. Maybe they're all seated in a circle on the floor or something like that.
Open air.
They can exactly. So the whole like construction of the class, the structure of it could be different. And between that and just the changes in the way the environment looks, I think could really go a long way toward deviating from, Hogwarts.
Yeah, I love that. The further we can get away from Harry Potty, I think the better.
And I like how you said there's.
Sorry,
like
again,
how you
I had
said
to say it
there's
once.
no.
I had to say it once. I won't say it again.
Yeah, like how you said there's no men. I am too on board with getting rid of Galad and Gawain. So hey.
Whoa, you can't jump ahead quickly. Don't do that, Mary. Wait a second. We're gonna get
fine.
I love this idea. I think we're all into. I think we've cut at this point and said Sheriam. We'll move her until later on. We'll get into the White Tower. We hope. I love this idea of the take it out of the classroom kind of normal concept we're used to seeing in movies with people with special powers. They sit at desks and they. I love the idea that changing that up might actually just be just enough for people to kind of feel like this is different. This is separate and. This is the Wheel of Time, and it's not just because I don't know all this. We have a lot of these type of movies, and I think that challenge will always be to make this feel something other and something completely distinct instead of just kind of sharing some of these ideas from other shows. So yeah, I love so far what you guys have come up with. Now we're jumping into and I've already seen some comments in chat. As far as what to do with Nynaeve's accepted test. Now. Natalia, when it comes to this entire test portion of the books, do you think it's important that we see it all, this entire ceremony, and pretty much would you take this from the books and slap it into, on a script and have it play out just like this for TV?
Probably not.
Okay. And why? Why?
It's too long.
It's just too long.
And I feel like it's a crap ton of production dollars that could be better spent elsewhere. If I'm being brutally realistic here, would I love to see it? Yes. We know that they've cast for Asian or partly Asian babies. So I very strongly suggest, or would think, sorry, let me just say that the last section with Lan and Malkier will definitely be a component that we see.
That's a good connection.
But I think we could probably lose Aginor because we've been there and done that. And although it would boost the senseless nudity component.
Everybody loves senseless nudity. Come on.
For the Amazon show.
Let's ask Todd that question. Todd, is the nudity going to be senseless?
Never. Nudity is never senseless.
Never senseless.
It's okay because we get topless
excuse
Galad
me.
in the next couple of chapters.
Excuse me.
Yes, Jess.
I'm bisexual and the nudity is not senseless.
There you go. See, okay, we should vote. Everybody in chat right now. Nudity, yes, thumbs up. Nudity, no, thumbs down. Let's find out. No, so yeah.
It doesn't need to be gratuitous, but I do think that the idea of having her go into it without any clothing so that she feels
important.
it makes you vulnerable, right?
Yep.
So you have to overcome that.
It's the whole skyclad witch thing. That's what it is.
Bitch, yes.
That's what it
So
is. It needs
I
that. It's part
think
of tradition.
the whole, especially the Aginor part of it, goes on for a really long time in the books. And I feel like we can touch on it in the show because it's sort of, they're the three parts of the test. And I do think that it's important to make it clear how difficult this test is. And then you can the viewer can extrapolate from that the test to become Aes Sedai has got to be a billion times more awful because this is just to graduate to your sophomore year, right? This is like going high school to college and it's fucking awful. Yeah. So, I think it's important to show it, but I feel like Natalia said, it's a lot of production dollars. It's a lot of special effects and stuff like that. I feel like they could probably trim each section down to get the idea across, but it doesn't have to go on for ever. Because God, that part with Aginor felt like it went on forever.
Yeah, I mean, to a character perspective, the piece from the Two Rivers and the piece from Malkier get you more emotional character building and world building than the piece with Aginor. Aginor is just a nightmare. And it speaks to her desire for vengeance more than it does anything else.
And we've seen that dream before, and
exactly.
I don't really feel like seeing it again.
Okay, so
do you want to know what I want cut?
Yeah, let's hear it. What do you want cut?
The dreams.
Oh man,
there are too many of them.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
Todd, my boy. I mean, honestly, some dreams are fine, but there's so many goddamn dreams. I'm derailing the conversation, but I feel really strongly about it. So anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
Okay, so ignoring that craziness, cutting dreams. That's insane. So no, I think exactly. So I'm going to disagree with most of you, at least that have spoken up about this. Look, this is the place to spend some production dollars. There's a couple things that I think that happen here. She's told this exact line. Well, it's close. Once you begin, you must continue to end. Refuse to go on, and no matter your potential, you'll be very kindly put out of the tower. And then she's told, and some women never come out of this thing. We also get this kind of ceremonial importance piece, right? You must want it. They say it after washing her clean of false pride and clean of false ambition, right? You come to us washed clean and pure, which is only something they say twice in the entire series, right? This notion of sin and washing and coming clean and being pure. This is not this is very ritualistic, right? This
because it's gross, Matt.
But
it's spares.
It's important to
because it's gross.
It's because it's gross. But it's important to establishing just who the Aes Sedai are, and this ceremony. it creates this understanding of this organization, and they take the ceremony extremely seriously. They say to her, "You must want to be Aes Sedai more than anything else in the whole world, enough to face anything, fight free of anything to achieve it. The White Tower cannot accept less. We demand it of you." There's that aspect has to come across, and I don't think that they can do it by cutting this up too much. I think they have to put the money here. This is the time we're going to see this happen. Later on, do we need to see this happen again? You can make a case that that's less important, but I think, especially if we're just jumping almost immediately, right? We get a little kind of walk through the White Tower, and then we go right to this. I feel like this is the place to spend money. Does anyone on the panel agree with me here?
I mean,
I agree with you, Matt.
I also agree that this is a good place to spend production dollars, but understanding the functions of a budget, we also have to be realistic about it. Now, what I will say is all of the ritual stuff, if they're going to do it, they need to be careful about it, because what can really happen with this is it starts tying into like gross purity culture stuff, which is fucking toxic. Girl, I'm with you. Like, you've got to be really careful with the way that you do that, because also, and I mean, jumping ahead to like when they're starting to, when they do the ceremony to raise an Amyrlin, there's a lot of heteronormativity happening there. There's a lot of sort of like cis normativity, which ideally maybe we would skip some of that. So Robert Jordan was a middle-aged man writing this book in the 90s. And so we have to understand that. But it doesn't give him a pass. And this is an opportunity for us to take these things that were maybe sort of like, yikes on bikes, and readapt them to the slightly more enlightened era that we live in now, in the year of our Lord 2020. So,
yeah, I would agree with that concept of avoiding like you just said, and honestly, and maybe it's just because I'm a guy, I didn't feel like, and that's never a way I've read that, and so I like that you brought that up, because I haven't ever looked at that scene in those eyes, like from a purity. I looked at it, and this is maybe just from a religious background. I definitely looked at it from a kind of a baptismal perspective. But not in kind of a creepy purity culture perspective, if that makes sense. I looked at this as like you're joining, like it was this at the very end. It's like you've left Nynaeve from where your village, and you've become Nynaeve, as part of this group. Like I definitely took it that way, and not that doesn't also potentially have some problems, but I guess I never looked at it that way.
And for clarity, I didn't necessarily read it that way either, but the translation of it, first of all, other people could have read it that way. Also, the translation of it to the screen still needs to be done carefully, because even if we didn't read it, even if nobody read it that way in the books, the translation of it to screen could still like kind of cross that line into weirdness. And so it's just, I have a lot of faith in Rafe and his team. So I feel optimistic that they're going to handle it well, but it is something that, I feel like needs to be handled with care.
Yeah, no. And Jen, how do you feel about this scene? And when it comes to, I guess we've now jumped back and forth between like use some of the budget here, how we do some of these ceremonial things. Jen, do you find the ceremonial aspect of what's going on with Nynaeve important to the overall theme of the Wheel of Time, of the Aes Sedai, of the White Tower itself? Or do you think that this particular kind of ceremonial piece doesn't really add anything to what, the viewers need for the Wheel of Time?
I have two wolves inside me, two camps.
Okay, let's hear them.
No, one agrees and disagrees with the points. What is Tarvalon? What is, it's his vision of what witches are. That's why you're going in naked, and it makes sense, right? Because that's ritualistic, right? We've all agreed we want to keep that, yet cut other parts. To me, it's like, if you're going to keep it, like, I guess you can keep some and then decide to eschew other parts, but you have to go in there with one mindset. Is it ritualistic or isn't it? And if it is, then maybe you need to stay on that path, but maybe change up what the ritual is. Say, for example, instead of pouring water over her head saying she's washed clean, maybe you can have like a light glow around her, or like little like motes coming around her, and something like you could do other things that maybe aren't so deeply rooted in religious culture. Sure. That we have in this world, because it's a fantasy world and you can do whatever you want but still make it ritualistic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I hadn't ever in essence you're suggesting an adaptation here which still keeps the thematic idea of this kind of Correct. Baptism, if you will, this entering a new society, this group, but gives it kind of less of a well-known kind of first agey, as we might perceive these things, and gives it maybe something that might be considered other, but we all understand what they're trying to say. Yeah, that's
maybe have a bell chime or something ethereal or something like that. You could do that, and you could have the same sort of connotation implied. That's all.
Yeah,
they could wrap her in the power to signify it.
Yeah, I mean there are a lot of different ways that you could handle it, and I think that the tower itself, one of the things that is kind of a problem, to some extent, the downfall of the tower in a lot of ways is their deeply rooted tradition and ritual. When you go into the hall of the tower and there's the whole she comes, all of that stuff, ritual is important to them, and so I certainly don't want to see that gone,
right?
Because I think it's important to establish that, just to show how sort of rooted in, like, how stuck in their ways they are. But like Jenn said, I think there are ways to do it that that depart from some of the more problematic parts of those types of ceremonies, regardless of what entity is doing them, and still get the idea across.
Yeah, no, I like this. And to those in chat, I've been watching some of your comments here. I'm kind of curious about this question. Give us a thumbs up if you would keep the scene all the way through, or if you wouldn't. I'm kind of curious, what would you guys change from this? Just if we weren't going to keep this, what are the aspects that you don't like or you think should be adapted to television differently? So kind of curious what everyone's going to say there. As we move on,
can I just say, if I do not hear the way back will come but once,
right.
Fast, if I don't hear that, I'm gonna riot. Like, remain steadfast. Shit, dude, I need to hear it.
I need to hear it too.
Yeah, so that's a great call out. Yeah, no, we were talking so much about the ceremonial aspect that I forgot that aspect has to be in the show. Rafe, if you ever watch this, hopefully you know this already. You don't need to hear this from anyone. But
come through, Rafe.
Yeah, that piece has to be in the show.
Be there.
Todd, did we miss anything, Todd, from this that you thought was an important call out from Nynaeve's accepted test? Is there anything here that's just like that we totally forgot that must be covered in our adaptation?
Let's just go with all that.
You're like, we covered it well.
I'm just we'll just mark mine out.
Can I just say?
By the way, you're supposed to chuck your paper like that. You just gotta chuck your paper behind you or something.
No, he's making notes. He's not mad.
No, I'm not mad. I'm. We won't discuss my notes on that. We'll just...
Okay, now I
can I just jump in with two things?
Yeah.
One, Sheriam says in between the first and second arch that the ancients say there are many worlds, which is quite nice because it's a nice tie-in to if they keep Rand on his stupid trip to the mirror worlds.
Lord have mercy.
And then the second really great thing that Sheriam says at the end, which I am just like, it hit me as I was reading it again today. Take what you have paid for. At the end with the dress, it's like, you paid a really high price. Take what you've paid for. Yeah. The momentous feel, like the huge feeling that I had there was just like real beautiful.
What I like is that's a twist on what they say
Jess
in Verin. It's take what you paid for versus take what you want and pay for it,
That's what I was gonna say.
Yep.
which are completely opposite, but they mean pretty much the same thing, which is really cool.
So there's one line that I hope that they do, which is "You are sealed to us now." I love the finality of that idea that she's made her choice, right? This is the whole idea, right? That they're like, look, your choices have consequences, and you've made this choice, and now there's no walking away from it now. And I hope that you feel that way. Yeah, no, exactly. They gave her all the opportunities to walk away, and it's that drive that she has, right, at this point, to protect her friends and to someday get back at those she believes are her enemies, that kind of drives her forward, and it kind of drives the viewers forward, even if the viewers at this point are like, this is kind of funky and weird and these people are strange, but you're with Nynaeve at this point, right? You're behind her. You're like, yeah, screw it, just do whatever they ask you to do because we want you to succeed, right? We're sealed with you now too, right? That's what you hope at the end of the scene is, as viewers, you're like, okay, I'm tied in. This is weird. I think this is weird, just like you do, Nynaeve. But that's okay because we want to know how this ends, and so that's what I hope that kind of comes out of the scene.
Yeah, I feel like the ideal outcome of that whole scene should be everybody on planet Earth walks out of it Team Nynaeve.
Yes,
100%. That's what I'm hoping for.
Also, the chance for Daniel Henney to be all like romantic and loving.
Yeah.
Possibly holding babies.
Don't even start with me.
I can't believe you jumped back to Daniel Henney.
God.
I'm real excited, yo.
You gotta keep it for that, if nothing else.
You guys, I watched Dora. I watched Dora over the weekend with my kids, and I called it market research. And I am so down for Madeline Madden. She's gonna kill it.
Well, speaking of Madeline Madden, the next chapter is chapter 24, and it's when Egwene meets Elaine. So, and Todd, I feel like you had a lot of comments in the last chapter, and you were the last one to jump in there. So you got first dibs on this section between Egwene and Elaine, which I will just throw out there as a preface. This is a ridiculous amount of exposition. Like, just like, hey, here's 7, 8, 9 people you should meet and know really quickly before we go back to Rand and Company for 20 chapters. You know what I mean? Like, it's just loaded. So Todd, what is it about this chapter that, you know, Rafe and his team, or that we need to get right when we're adapting this for television? Like, is this scene important to you?
Are we moved on to chapter 24? Or
yes,
are we
yes,
still?
Sir.
Okay. So
we're not talking anymore about the testing.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I have that one crossed out. See, I marked it out. So, this is basically where Egwene and Elaine and Min meet, and I mean, this can be done so quickly that it's not really. I mean, I have cut most of it, so because I don't think it's really has to be a long drawn out scene. It can be a really simple couple of minutes, hey, how you doing, and get on with it.
As far as, and do you think that's for the whole entire thing? Because they talk about Elsie Grinwell, they talk about Logain, they end up meeting Galad and Gawain, and they were talking. I think Elida shows up, and questions.
She
Min
comes
off
talk
screen.
to Min. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, do you think this can all be simplified? Do we have to have this kind of meet every single important character at the White Tower before we leave it kind of moment?
No. And I really, depending on what they do with Logain in the story in the show, we don't even know that Logain's going to be there when all this is going on. Depending on how they work him, from everything we're hearing, he's going to be different in the show than he is in the books. So we're not even really sure.
It's at least going to be an expanded role. We're going to see more of him. So
yeah,
right.
So I wonder yeah. Go ahead.
So I'm kind of leaning towards, really this all boils down to Elaine, Min, Egwene, and Elida there at the end, and I think you can cut it down a lot and make it a lot easier to deal with, or just cut it all together, in my opinion.
Wow, you're a cut for this whole chapter. That's an interesting way to go about it. You're just like, get rid of it. It's gone.
Cut.
Okay, sorry.
Min hasn't been cast yet, has she? We have heard nothing about Min.
I know. I don't want to talk about it.
Listen, guys, we don't want another Tom Gate, okay?
Yeah. But you see, if Min Gate is an appropriate Tom Gate. I wasn't even in the Tom Gate, but I'm
Well,
all
there were
in
so
on
many
Min Gate.
high panic people who were worried about Tom, and I'm like, y'all,
I know.
drink
I
some
know.
water
I'm
and
not
calm
worried.
down.
I mean, do we need her?
Min is a plot device in tight pants.
Shut up. I swear, you guys all say
I
this
mean,
crap just to piss me off.
honestly,
And
Min
it's
is like she's like a kind of a sexy lamp in pants.
Oh my god.
Right? Like she
And-
started out, listen, Min started out badass as hell. We met her
Yes.
in Barrelada and I was team Min. I was like, hell yeah, girl. Like fucking throw out those gender roles. You do you. And then all of a sudden she meets Rand and she's like, ah, and she becomes a sexy lamp. Like her whole fucking focus is to read a book and bang Rand. And like, what is the point of that? I was so disappointed in the way that
Okay,
Min
hold on.
turned out.
I want to ask everyone in chat this because you're all so far wrong about this.
Dude, I will fucking
No,
fight you.
that's fine. That's fine. We'll see who's right. We'll see who's right. Everyone that's watching right now. Everyone that's watching. A thumbs up for if you agree with the erroneous Jess about that Min is a lamp with tight pants, or a thumbs down if you actually believe that Min is a fantastic character who is going to be amazing in the show. Okay, let's find out what happens. So
Sexy
lots of
lamp
thumb
is what I'm
downs.
calling
I
her
saw
from
the
now
first-
on.
That's
first
a Neil
one.
Gaiman thing, and it's like if you have a female character, she can be replaced by a lamp. She's
By the
a
way-
sexy lamp. That's all she is. She's nothing. She's not important. She's a shit character.
See,
She
there you go.
literally shines light on things, Matt. She could not be more of a lamp.
I just want to. Okay, that was funny. However,
I've
I
never
want to point
seen
out
it.
something that everyone in chat, minus a couple of wrong people, are doing thumbs down right now. I just want to point this out. I want to point out that the large majority, other than Joe Perry, who gave a little, he wouldn't pick. Like, pick your side, man. You can't just not pick this.
That was a
either-
fist bump. That wasn't an abstention.
That was not it. That was an abstention. This was it. It was not a fist bump. That was an abstention. Joe, I want to see.
Maybe
a
he's
thumbs up or
punching you in the
thumbs
face
down.
because you're wrong.
Yeah, maybe that was a face punch.
I
didn't even take water there. I was like,
I'm more on that side actually.
yes, thank you.
Here's what I think. I think that Min had a lot to offer, and I think she was done wrong. I think she can be.
That's the thing.
Agreed.
I'm not
That's
saying
fair.
you should cut Min. I'm saying this is an opportunity for Min to become the character that she should have been in the first place.
I think there
So,
was.
so Todd,
We're
I mean,
expanding
the only
fame.
thing I wanted
That's
to
all I'm
keep was
saying.
the visions.
the visions.
Yeah, it's
The
the only thing I
visions.
wanted to keep.
So, well, let's go back to this scene because we just jumped into Mingate, which I think should trend. Mingate is important.
Hashtag Mingate, everybody. Mingate 2020.
Hashtag lamp pants or something like that.
I don't know any lamps that sling knives all over the place. But
Yeah,
hey, if
Min's-
we want to go with that.
Min's amazing. You guys are crazy.
Yeah.
He's a
let's go-
female Tom.
A female Tom.
He
Oh,
should
man.
be a female
You
Tom.
guys keep on ruining Min. I'm
Tom's
doing a
a
Min.
badass.
We're gonna do a live show
Remember-
about Min.
remember,
Yes.
none of
I
you have to
like
come.
Min.
You can all stay at
Yes.
home, and I'll get some people.
I
that-
like the concept of men.
So do I.
I love the concept of men more than any of the other girls. If she was done a little bit better, that's all.
By the way,
I
Rebecca
love
Harriman
Min.
just
I think Min
hashtag.
is great. Min was done dirty in these books. She could have done more. She should have done more. That's not on Min. That's on Robert Jordan. Come on, dude.
Agreed. Agreed.
By the way,
You
I
could
love
have done better.
Rebecca hashtag we love lamp. I love that. That's great.
Like that.
That's well done. Oh, man. Okay, so we got off on Min here, which is a funny statement. So they talk about we have this
There you
whole
go,
scene about with Elaine
I'll drink to
and
that.
Egwene and Min, and then we see them actually meet Galad and Gawain. Okay, so let's move to characters that are really actually not that good, as compared to Min.
Agreed.
As long as we
So-
can come back to Elida, I have something to say about that.
Yeah, so Todd, are you a keep or get rid of these two characters from the scene? I don't want to go through the whole show, but do you think it's important that we know they're at the tower and what's going on with them, and that we have this little moment between Egwene and Galad and that we have this little brother sister, moment between Elaine and Gawain. Is this important for the show to kind of put in the, when we're at the White Tower, do we need to see this?
The only thing it does is kind of show Gawain and Egwene meeting for the first time, and other than that, no, I don't think we need it.
Okay. Well, and it's ostensibly, I'm with Todd on this one. Ostensibly, it's meant to sort of further the idea that, Gawain is Elaine's full brother, Galad is her half brother, and she doesn't like him. And theoretically speaking, we will have already established this when Rand meets Elaine and Caemlyn. So from that
we cut that.
Oh, did we?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, it's got to happen at some point, because like the whole idea with like Elaine's whole problem with Galad is establishing his whole lawful good bullshit, right? So it's got to be established at some point. So if it doesn't happen in Caemlyn, it's going to need to happen here. So if it like one or the other, it doesn't need to be both. And Gawain can die in a fire. So that's where I'm at.
What I love is that the beginning of the show was so kind of all in tune. We were like, we need to keep this scene. We'll go to the tower, accepted. Now we're moving towards like Min, cut. I like this. I love this aspect. Do we need Elaida to show up then? Do we need this kind of Elaida questioning Min?
I like Elaida showing up here because it does a couple things. One is this is kind of the groundwork for. Oh wait, spoilers. Okay, spoilers.
Oh yeah, spoilers. So yeah, let's throw a spoiler banner up.
Spoilers. I know we have a couple people who haven't gotten this far, so spoilers. Yeah, this is setting the framework up for the upcoming coup. It's showing, Elaida is in her element at the White Tower versus the advisor to the queen and to the daughter heir. And I love how Elaida completely and totally ignores Egwene. Absolutely ignores her, which is just going to be beautiful later.
That is actually super gorgeous. Like, well observed. That's amazing.
Well observed. I like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so this is not unheard of so far in the show, but I totally disagree with most of what you've all said.
Surprise.
Okay, so I want to make this.
Tables have turned.
I know this is like 5 on 1-1. Not cool. So look,
I like it.
We barely get much of the White Tower in this book. I want to see, so personally, I would like to see Rafe and his team really build out the White Tower. I want to see some politics going on that we don't see in these scenes. Yes, Rand's story is really important, but I want to see more of what's happening and why we should care that this organization exists and how tied they are to the world. And I think this is a great opportunity through the eyes of Egwene and Nynaeve, right? Like this part about Gawain and Galad. Yeah, sure. Is this specific interaction that necessary? Maybe not, but at least seeing them, as far as their training and warders and what's going on, getting this larger sense of why they're there and that there's a larger purpose here than just these kind of these micro kind of interactions between them, which are important. It's like, hey, there's my brother, and that's not really my brother, blah, blah, blah. It's nice banter, but in the end, I hope they give us more than what we get in the books. Like, for example, Logain. Someone brought this up, and I think this is a great idea. Well, I don't know. I guess maybe I haven't really sat down and said we must have this, but should we see his gentling? Let's say he is here at the White Tower. Should we get insight into this, or should we always stay at the point of view of Nynaeve and Egwene? Because it's an opportunity to show another side of this process, right? For Rand, why Egwene's concerned, and what gentling actually means, and what this, the Red Ajah, what their purpose is. Should we, Jenn, see Logain actually being gentled?
I think I already gave myself away. I kind of buried the lead with my head shake there. No, because I think I like how we did that. That was kind of the off-screen thing you guys have spoken about before, right? I think he wants to. I think it's more impactful as a viewer and as a reader to not know exactly what happens when that goes down, but see Logain's descent into almost. Yep. You don't know what happened to have the 13 there around him, but I also like because it parallels later when you have Mazrim Taim taking okay, the Ashaman and turning them against their will. There's a parallel there, and both happen with Jordan and Sanderson at the end, off screen. So if I feel like, because there's a parallel there between turning someone black as you know, a guy against their will, and this gentling, I think you should have, if you show one, you have to show the other. But I think it's also more impactful to let your imagination just go wild, like to have it happen off screen and then see their reaction afterwards. It's like, you know how you go in those horror movies and you hear the screams of someone being tortured off screen, but it doesn't actually show what's going down in the cell? That can be somewhat more frightening than actually showing the full experience. So I think I like that. I like that a lot.
Joe just mentioned that idea of seeing a little bit off screen. Rob mentioned seeing maybe the immediate aftermath. Like, these are not things that we get to see in the books necessarily. And so actually being able to kind of create that, and what that tells us about, you know, about the danger, right? You have the danger of male channelers. And so I think the viewers are going to have to go through this, right? They're going to have the same conflict which we do, which is this necessary? And it's hard to believe it's necessary unless you are in this culture and you believe that the male channelers are dangerous, and you've seen how dangerous they can be. And I said, I have seen that. So I hopefully maybe that's what they'll give us, which is how dangerous Logain was, how actually dangerous he was. And then on the other side, just the process that happens to take that away. I don't know. Jess, are you in the same camp of like,
I have opinions. Okay,
let's hear it.
So I actually, the extent to which it's shown on screen, I don't have a huge opinion on it, but I do feel like something should be shown for a couple of reasons. First of all, gentling is a corollary to stilling. We talk about stilling. The novices are required to memorize the name of every woman in the tower who's ever been stilled. In the book, that's described what it means. Again, this is a show. We have to show, we don't tell, right? So the process and the aftermath of being cut off from the true source, we're not going to describe it. We're going to have to show it. So we need to understand what that means. Plus, we have this opportunity to dive into the sort of Kobayashi Maru of gentling men who can channel, because honestly, it's a no-win scenario, because it's completely inhumane. It's a terrible thing to do to a person. But at the same time, what else are they going to do? Because these men lose their minds and they're going to hurt people. They're going to destroy things. They're going to do things that are very, very bad. So something has to be done. This is the only thing that we know, and it's terrible, but it's the only thing we can do to fix it, and it sucks. And so being able to dive into that whole like moral dilemma of the end justifies the means, you know, that's one of like the big things that you really have to grapple with here. And you also have to take into consideration the impact of doing that. Stilling men who can channel, or gentling men who can channel, and then they die, which means they don't get married, they don't have children. You are essentially committing genocide, because you are removing these people from the gene pool. You have fewer channelers. It's this domino effect, right? So I feel like, I think it's important.
It does show, you know, that the Aes Sedai, that's the, you know, the main calling of the Red Ajah is to find these men and to remove their danger. It shows the Aes Sedai in a seat of judgment. It shows their power. Depending on how they frame the scene, if they have him like trussed up with the power with 13 sisters around him, plus the Amerlin seat, you know, have it be, if everything in the tower is white and light and this is dark, you can show that stark contrast. You can have you know, he's still defiant, he's still screaming. You don't have to show that on the screen. You could like cut to a scene of like Nynaeve and Elaine and Egwene off, you know, not in the room but nearby, and they are hearing it, and they're reacting to it. So you see what's happening through their shocked reactions to it. You could do it that way and have those atmospherics and show. And I like somebody said, you know, gentling is permanent. Nynaeve says, "Hold my beer." So you do need that. You need to see how horrible it is, to see how impactful it is when Nynaeve actually cures it. And also you need it to show, because something like this is going to happen spoilers, something like this is going to happen to Swan.
Yeah.
You have to show the danger of what could happen to Rand at this point, and you also have to contrast it to that cup of wine that shows up later.
The only way that I want to see it on screen is if they call it the Kobayashi Maru.
Okay, I want to bring
And somebody has to bite an apple.
Some things in chat are awesome. They came up with this hashtag. We say, when we end the show, we always say smash to black. They came up with hashtag scream to black, which I think is awesome. Well said. And someone mentioned the idea that some of the Red Ajah might be kind of laughing, like showing kind of the experience of how different Aes Sedai feel about this will kind of amp up the complexity of what, in other words, not everyone has the same motive here, right? And the various motives. Say, Jen, what were you going to say?
That's crazy. I love this because I never considered until whoever said that in the chat that a Red Ajah member would be laughing. I think they're all like, this is a serious business, and we have taken upon the mantle of the responsibility of hunting these men down, and for the good of all, solemnly carrying out the business that the rest of our sisters are too squeamish to do themselves. We are the Red. We are going to do this awful deed for the betterment of all, and we take what we do seriously. Somebody laughing? That never occurred to me. And first of all, Aes Sedai laughing. I was like, mean. I see them looking at it like, we finally got one. We're fine. We're helping the world.
Yeah.
This is one less a person on the chessboard to hurt someone. This is like putting a dog down, kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, unfortunate, sad, we must do this. I never.
And you could see them justifying it for, this is for your own good, because as long as you can touch the source, you're going to lose your mind. This is going to help you, which of course, obviously from the men's perspective, that's not the way it works at all. But it's, I feel like, I mean, you're kind of onto something with that, where, there are going to be some women who take it super, super seriously. They don't like that they have to do it, but it's the only solution. There are women who are going to be like, no, this is for your own good. We're helping you. And then there are going to be women who are like, dude, fuck men.
There's going to be the Bellatrixes, and there's going to be the Nurse Ratchets.
Okay.
That's a perfect way of putting it.
Wow. Okay, Natalia, last statement on Logain. Is there anything that we're missing out of the scene, or does everyone agree here? Nat, what's your last take on Logain?
I don't think we need to see it. We see him in chains and like how powerful and intimidating he is. And then we see him real sad on a bench, and I feel like that shows you enough to say that what happened to him was really terrible and sad.
You just want some music like everybody hurts. You just want to see him there, and they're just doing yeah, exactly. I saw someone who was it in chat just said like Black Tower or bust. Oh yeah, Champion of Solaris. I like that. Exactly. This is definitely going to be an impetus if they do this scene really well. If they do show us something, there'll be an impetus for viewers to have a negative reaction to it and actually be very supportive of when the Black Tower begins, which will actually work really well, I think, into the plot. So there are a couple other scenes that happen in 38, 39, 40. We're probably not going to get to those. I want to open up just quickly, give anyone, this is a live call and talk show. We've been having so much fun talking that we've, just haven't jumped over to the call-ins. So if there is somebody who'd like to call in, we'll probably only take 1 or 2 calls. If you're out there and you'd like to say hi to Jenn and Jess, and you'd like to agree with me about men and disagree with the rest of the panel, then you're allowed to call in. Otherwise, don't call in. Don't do it. No.
I appreciate you.
No, you don't have to do that. 1 second.
There you go.
But yeah, so while we wait for people to call in, I want to throw this out to the panel. So as we kind of end this little live adaptation of the White Tower, what's missing? Because when we come back in chapters 38, 39, and 40, we actually it's the leaving aspect, right? It's more of a leave taking than it is really establishing anything happening in the White Tower. Is there anything, and maybe Natalia, we'll start with you since we went to you last with Logain. Is there anything that you want to see Rafe and the team adapt for TV that we haven't talked about when it comes to the White Tower in this, whatever it's season 1 or season 2, that we don't really get in The Great Hunt, right? Some scene that just doesn't exist in the books, but you think would be useful, necessary, or maybe instrumental in kind of establishing the White Tower for viewers?
The political side. So we don't know anything about actual Aes Sedai. We know lots about our girls. We know enough about Moraine. We're starting to get a picture of individual Aes Sedai, but we know nothing about sort of what their power structure looks like. We know nothing about the Hall. We know nothing about sort of the hierarchical structure of the Aes Sedai within the Aes Sedai. So that'd be real cool.
Yeah, I love the digging deeper into the politics. I'm really hoping for that to happen. Now, if that were to happen, Natalia, do you want to see that before Egwene and such arrive? In other words, should we arrive at the White Tower from an adaptation standpoint before this moment?
No.
No? You don't want to do that?
No. Unless we do a New Spring thing, which I'm really like, I'm still holding hope for a whole New Spring episode, basically. But no, I think we need to come at it through the eyes of Nynaeve and Egwene, because that's where it's going to have the most impact for us.
Yeah, I love the idea of the politics side. I agree there is something very impactful about them arriving here and not already kind of being embedded with what's going on. But it does give an opportunity for Rafe and his team to maybe pull back a little bit and let everyone feel like what the ties are around the world and why these people are so at times feared and loved. When it comes to this, Jenn, is there something that's missing from The Great Hunt when it comes to the White Tower that you're hoping for us to adapt, or hoping Rafe to adapt into the show itself?
It's very simple. I only have one thing. It kind of struck me as I read the books later, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, really, I think the first time you come across the Hall of the Tower, I think, first of all, it wasn't like in a dream Egwene has or whatever. But anyway, you don't come across the actual, like, seated hall. Like, they don't have to be in session. I just want to see, when you talk about the picturesque or panoramic or whatever you want to call it, kind of flybys of them going to maybe Nynaeve's accepted. The heart of the tower is two things. I guess the Amyrlin study, which you kind of get to, or the Amyrlin's rooms, but that's not really important. I want to see the central hall of the tower. And you don't see that for books and books and books.
Yeah.
They introduced that way too late in the game, as far as I'm concerned. You spend so much time in the White Tower and you don't even know what the Hall of the Tower even looks like.
Yeah, I love that idea.
I want them to at least have a flyby scene of the Hall of the Tower. Maybe them walking around the outskirts of it on their way to the test or after the test, or when they're walking around and Elida's talking to men or something. You don't even see what the actual seat of power looks like. Come on.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that would be awesome.
Side of it, just the side. Doesn't have to be in session. Just a crumb, sir. I just didn't have to be in I could get like a glimpse.
You just want a little peek.
Maybe Egwene. Just one of the arteries. Just like a
Egwene,
shot.
like through a door.
Come on, man.
Todd, what's your? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, Todd, what's your kind of missing piece, or if you think there is one, when it comes to something about the White Tower that we don't see in the Great Hunt, but really would establish the idea of the White Tower to viewers?
I think this could go along with what Jenn was talking about, but the emptiness, how empty the tower is, because they talk about, I forgot the number, 40. There's only 40 novices, and only 4 or 5 of those will make it to accepted. And they talk about how empty the rooms are, and I think that's something that they kind of need to show how hard a time the Aes Sedai are having recruiting new people.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with that completely. I think that a glimpse into the politics of the White Tower, which, like Natalia said, if we can start out with some stuff from New Spring as a sort of foundation for what's going to happen. So we see how Moiraine and Swan get set on their path. We see how Moiraine and Lan end up meeting each other. And then we launch into the main story. It doesn't even have to necessarily take that long, but we can, see Guitarra fucking, he is on the mountain and he's super loud or whatever. But and then maybe even they could insert a scene where, Guitarra has died and now the hall is convening and they're going to raise a new Amerlin or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we can get some glimpse into the power structure there. And then, like Todd said, we don't find out until a little bit later on. We know that there are only 40 novices or whatever, but we don't really know what that means in the scope of the tower because we don't know how many people can actually be housed there, right? So we need some way to illustrate that, there are 40 novices, but there's room for hundreds of them. And the tower isn't going out and proactively looking for women who can channel to bring them into the tower. I've said it a million times, the White Tower does not have good marketing. They do not have good branding. They need a PR professional super bad. And so, kind of illustrating their hubris.
Yeah.
That they're holding themselves so far above that, we're only going to take the ones who come to us kind of thing. And the result is this empty tower and they have a fraction of the women that they could have. I think in the course of this whole thing, there are opportunities to illustrate that in different ways.
Yeah.
Again, showing, whereas it's told to us in the books. So I would like to see that.
I love a mix of all those, right? This idea you can get a peek into kind of the inner workings, these large gathering places, but you could also use those as demonstrating the emptiness of them. Mm-hmm. And I love and that the politics can also be worked in. Everyone's thrown out there can definitely be, it wouldn't even take long, right? We're talking a couple minutes and you would have a good idea of what's going on. Mary, you're the last one. Is there something else that's missing that hasn't come up here that you think that we need to adapt into the show from The Great Hunt that we just never see in the books?
I can't think of anything that hasn't already been covered or you haven't decided is going to be its own standalone show.
Well said. Okay, so we have two callers. Let's bring these two callers in. I'd love to hear from them, and then I'll give some final thoughts. We'll let Jenn and Jess throw out a last parting thought, and then we will be done for the night. So let's bring our first caller. It's Abigail. Hey, Abigail. Welcome to the Dusty Wheel. How you doing?
Hey.
Good. How are you guys?
Good. So what have we been talking about tonight that's kind of, kicked you onto the phone and made you want to call in?
It's my chance to talk to Jenn and Jess again after seeing them at SpoilerCon.
Gotcha.
How's it going, girl?
So what
I'm waiting for JordanCon, but sorry.
No, that's okay.
Sorry.
Are you going to JordanCon?
Right around the corner. Yeah.
That's awesome. So Abigail, you are going to JordanCon? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Have you been to JordanCon before?
No.
Oh, awesome.
Yes.
Welcome. That's going to be great. Yeah, no, JordanCon's going to be fantastic.
Abigail's actually the one who had the idea to have us do a thing where we raise people to the shawl.
Nice.
Which means like a super fun thing. So kudos to Abigail for coming up with that because that was a great idea.
Absolutely. So you've been listening, Abigail, to our conversation. Do you think there's something missing from The Great Hunt as far as a scene, some kind of theme about the White Tower that Rafe and his team should definitely include that we just don't get in The Great Hunt?
I was thinking that there's a lot about the architecture and just the visuals of the city that I don't get from the words. But if I saw it interpreted on the screen, it would click. And with all the things that happen later in the White Tower, having it be big and perfect and majestic, and it's so not that. Like maybe some kind of theme in the music, but not the visuals, or even just the shadow of Dragonmount casting half or more of the island in shadow is a kind of super, super pre-foreshadowing hint. But otherwise, everything is perfect and white and gleaming and shiny, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I really like that idea that, you've got this shining city on the hill, and, it's well established that the Aes Sedai refuse to acknowledge the possibility that the Black Ajah actually exists. And so using the environment and the music to sort of, you've got this beautiful shining white tower. It's open and it's airy and it's bright and it's well lit. And then you have this sort of discordant kind of dark music happening to kind of not everything is as it seems kind of thing. Like, I really love that idea. Yeah. I was not thinking about the impact of the musical score on what the viewer sees and perceives, but that's an excellent observation.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I hope that, like you said, Abigail, a lot of this can be done visually as far as communicating, about the White Tower, what we want people to believe about it, and also kind of insinuating or implicitly suggesting things that are coming. And whether or not it's, I wonder if it's going to be Game of Thrones like, where they have sweeping camera kind of going through the city and kind of giving us an idea of what it looks like without necessarily having to visit it in scene. But yeah, I'd love that aspect. Pulling back and seeing Dragonmount there, that'd be fantastic. Absolutely.
Well, and I love the idea of Dragonmount casting the shadow, because what's the thing that the White Tower fears the most? It's the Dragon Reborn. And Dragonmount it's Luz Theron Telemon's Dick Mountain, right? He creates it when he destroys himself, and just the idea of it casting the shadow over the city. The dragon has been reborn. Shit's about to pop off. Like, the symbolism of that is fantastic. Like, well observed.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great one. Hey, Abigail, thank you so much for calling in and saying hi to Jenn and Jess. And hopefully we'll meet up. I'd like to meet you too over at JordanCon. I'll be there. So looking forward to it. I guess all of us on the today's panel will be at JordanCon. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
And if it gets canceled, we're going anyway.
If I'm allowed in the country, I'll be there.
Oh.
Hell yeah.
Oh, way to send it a sour note. See you, Abigail. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So we have one more caller. We all know him well.
Norm!
Let's bring to the call. It's Norm. Hey, how you doing, Lanfear?
Norm.
Hello, Norm.
Good evening. Good evening, ladies. Jess, Jenn, welcome to the tavern. So
Thank you.
Okay. I have to say everything that you guys are talking about today would make a great season 2, like episode 1 or episode 2 episode. Like the entire episode should be the White Tower, and just see the machinations and everything that goes on in there. Because this is something that, we did not get to see in the prequels of Star Wars. All of the testing and all the fun stuff with the Padawans and stuff. This is something we can do. It's a great opportunity. And I'm sorry, Tal, this is production dollars that we all need to have spent on like 1 or 2 episodes just on the White Tower. And it would be brilliant.
So let's ditch the mirror worlds.
I would be fine with ditching the mirror worlds.
The reason why the mirror worlds are there is to give enough time for Egwene and Elaine to train in the White Tower. It's just to move it's a time jump. You got to get one time, and they can come up with a different way of doing it. And if they do it like they did in the book, where they bounce between the scenes in the White Tower and the scenes of the hunt for the horn back and forth, you can give the illusion of time passing as both of these things are happening.
Whatever.
I'm gonna say
you can't drop no mirror worlds.
The mirror world is fine, except for the part that it takes way more chapters than it needs to.
Okay, that I will say
flicker,
this.
flicker.
Yeah,
flicker.
if you want to say to this is true, consider the amount of chapters the Mirror Worlds get, and then consider the amount of chapters the White Tower gets. It doesn't make much sense. I'll agree with that.
Consider the amount of chapters that fucking Perrin's training montages in the World Stream take. Like, don't even get me started.
Okay, we'll have to bring
I
you
didn't
back
realize
for that one.
how many chapters, even in the very last book, even in A Memory of Light, are just Perrin still learning and fighting Slayer. There's so many chapters.
Nothing happens. Oh my God, I hate it.
Why do we need 3 different ways to travel before traveling is rediscovered? You have the ways, you have the mirror worlds, you have the world of dreams. I mean, come on, pick one.
Stop screwing with my metaphysics, okay? Stop screwing with my metaphysics. Leave them alone.
Metaphysics, you know,
look, we can get rid of like the braid tugging and the straightening your skirts crap. And
Excuse me?
Oh, right.
And with that note,
I just want to see a mirror doll stuck to a door. That's all I want to see.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
true.
And, you want to know what? That brings up a really great point. And this is something that Daniel Green has talked about, the elements of horror in the Wheel of Time. And it's not anything that I had thought about just even reading through it. And now that I'm thinking about these scenes and what they might look like on the screen, y'all, I stopped watching Game of Thrones after like 2 episodes because it was too gory. I don't have the option to stop watching Wheel of Time. Like, the horror aspects of it, I am both intrigued and terrified.
Yeah,
Intrigued and terrified. I don't do well with gore and shit, y'all. I don't know. Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I would love. That's gonna be awesome, and that part we're
I'm
definitely
all
gonna
in.
get right. So
Yes.
you're all in.
Sounds like bring it on. Ah.
So
all the blood.
Mary's laptop died, so she's
Oh,
she's had to
no.
leave us, and I am on 5%, my friends.
well, we are ending right now. So hey, Lancers, thank you so much for calling in, man, and for sharing your ideas and your thoughts there. I totally agree. A season 2 premiere, if that's where we're at, coming into Tarvalin, and I would love that absolutely, and I definitely think it deserves one episode, if not more than that. So I appreciate it, man. Have a good night, and we'll talk to you again sometime soon.
Hey, and I just wanted to say real quick that, yes, I am going to Jordan Con. I just bought my ticket today, so I'll see you all there and
I'm
meet you
looking
guys
forward to
there.
it,
So
yeah, that's awesome.
I'm looking forward to it too. So
Oh yeah,
see
definitely.
you guys
Can't wait.
there. So
Yeah, see
take care, everybody. Have a great night.
Yay!
We'll see
you.
Good night. Good night.
Bye.
Well, with that being said, I appreciate both of you, Jess and Jen, joining in with us tonight. And
It was our pleasure.
yeah, this is always
Like,
fun
do we
for
have to stop? Can we keep going? Because I'm having
Right?
a ball.
Well, this is the funny part about this is we got through like 5 chapters, so that's like the Great Hunt has been like we've just slowed. I mean, it's awesome because there's just so much material there as compared to the Eye of the World. I think that just Jordan starts just kind of digging into a lot of his plots and such. So it's been fun to kind of just take it slowly and just dig into some of these kind of fun pieces. So I'll give you a parting thought, Jen. Is there anything that we missed that you want us to hear as far as thoughts you had about the White Tower being adapted to the show?
Here's my thing. I think depending on your personality, you're going to see certain things. That's what I was thinking when I was getting ready for this. I was thinking, depending on what Ajah you represent, for example, I'm a Brown. So I'm thinking there needs to be focus on the libraries. How much knowledge is stored within Tarval? It should be awe-inspiring. It should be like the Beast's library in Beauty and the Beast, right? It should be like, oh my gosh, you open the door.
Oh, that was such a good
Open your
library.
eyes, and it's like this library. Like, I want to see that. But I think it's just depending on what Ajah you are inside. The White Tower represents us all, and depending on our personalities, we're not going to be content unless we see each Ajah being fully represented.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. Absolutely, that's a great call out. Jess, anything that we missed that you think was important to this live adaptation of the White Tower before we close out the night?
I think that, to Jen's point, the introduction of the White Tower is a great opportunity to introduce the Ajahs, because you hear a little bit about it as the series goes on. But I think that this is going to be a rough task. This is going to be something that's going to be hard for the folks who are making the show, but because there's so much going on in the White Tower. But the specific Ajahs, it's in a way one of the things that you can use to delineate or put a person in a bucket oh, this person's a brown. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that we can expect from a brown. Oh, this person's a green. She's fucking.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's
Period.
Period.
Because honestly, the Green Ajah is the Battle Ajah, which is just a cover for the
Which is a battle. I love it.
But you know, this is an opportunity to kind of introduce those concepts and the sort of, you know, the diversity and the kinds of pursuits that that I want to have, and then the diversity within each of those Ajahs, the different type of people you're going to have there. You know, I don't think that that'll be easy to convey, but this is an opportunity to at least scratch the surface of that so people can understand depth, you know?
Yep. Yeah. Rafe and his team have their work cut out for him here. This is going to be a tough job to do this really, really well. There's so many things we brought up tonight, just what we talked about. So, and those things you just called out at the end, they're huge. We could have done probably a whole show about showing the diversity of the different Ajah and how they would go about doing that and adapting to the show. So, to all of you that have come and watched tonight, thank you so much for being with us. We always do an after show. It's the live shows channel on Discord. If you want to find our link to Discord in the description, you can meet us over there. We'll continue the conversation. If I didn't get to some of the questions you threw up in chat, you know, I'll try to go back and see what those were. Feel free to ask me again. I think this is a really difficult task for Rafe, and so I'm sure this won't be the last time we ever talk about the White Tower and the live adaptation side of things. But to those of you that, like I said, were in chat, and Jenn and Jess and my normal panelists, you guys are awesome for showing up on our this weekly show. Come back Sunday. I'm going to have John from What Up here. We're going to be breaking down characters, doing deep dives, maybe with Gawain even. So we'll see what you think about him, because we're going to do the characters we love and the characters we love to hate. And so, of course, we're going to be back again the following Wednesday with Kate Redding, Michael Kramer, and talking with the narrators of The Wheel of Time. And I can't wait till that happens.
I love them so much. They're just the sweetest.
I know. I can't wait. I have never met with them. It's kind of a bucket list moment for me. So yeah.
You're going to have a great time. We got to talk with them a little bit at SpoilerCon last year.
Oh, awesome.
And they're fantastic. You're going to have a great time.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. And we have other shows coming up. And to top it all off, April 1st, Brandon Sanderson will be here. So there's some crazy shows. I can't wait to do them all. But this was amazing. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. And as we say around here, good night. And maybe tonight it'll be Scream to Black.
If you want news and